Sif Gimel and Sif Hey, we're going to try to the best of our ability to tackle what has become coined by the Paiskim as Nesinah lechatchila, or in the words of some Paiskim, Chazara lechatchila, which really boils down to the Bir Halacha in Sif Gimel, and hopefully we'll try B'siyata Dishmaya to come out with some clarity what you could and what you cannot do. The disclaimer that I'm going to try not to say many times throughout the year is that there's always an issue with Bishul. Meaning, any case in the world that we're going to talk about, there's a second Nikuda called, is there a problem of Bishul? Meaning, whether we say you're allowed to or not allowed to place something onto a plata, onto an overturned pan, onto a radiator, because it's just not normal and it's not mechzi and whatever the case is going to be. But avada, you have to be mindful of bishul. What does that mean? Again, I'm going to say this one time clearly, I hope, and I try not to come back to this. What that means is if a radiator is not a makom bishul, or maybe a hefsek kedera, right? We'll use the lashon of sivhei. If we have a hefsek kedera that's full of food, which we'll call your you have, we'll say, a blech on top of a flame, and on top of the blech, you have a pot of cholent, an old school cholent, and on top of that cholent, you want to put something. The item that you could put there, this is just a avada, you have to be mindful of bishul, which means if you're going to be putting a liquid, you could have a problem called bishul achar bishul that we're machmer b'davar alach. If you're putting a davar yavish, you have to be mindful that it's mufusha tzarka, yes, be afui, whatever the case is going to be. Whether maybe it's baked, and now is it going to be baked further? Am I taking my raw challah now, making it a cooked challah? Am I taking a piece of bread and I'm making it a piece of toast? Am I taking a steak that was 50% cooked, which was edible, and now I'm making it fully cooked? Those are all bishul shilas. Those are all shilas that we have to deal with extensively in Shin Yud Ches, and that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. And therefore, whatever we're going to come out mutter at Aser is always going to be mindful of the Isser of Bishul, number one. Number two, Hakdama. And this is just because we always have to be mindful that there's other areas of halacha. We said the story with the crayons and the muksa. We don't have to chazim. But, lemashal, if we're going to say something is mutter, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're being makel on an isser called noilad, which is if I have something congealed and then it's going to become a liquid. Thank you very, very much. God bless you. It doesn't mean that we're being makel on this isser called noilad. It doesn't mean you're being machmir either. It just means we're not commenting on the bishul chelik. That is critically important because you finish learning sivei and you see something is mutter, and before you know it, Shabbos morning, you're going and you're taking your soup out of your fridge. You're saying Gavaldik, Hafsikadera, I'll be machmer like Rav Yashiv, and it's on top of a blech, on top of a pot, and the pot has food in it, and I put it on top, and oh, look at this meifus. No one ever thought about that I could have boiling hot soup from my fridge on Shabbos. An avada that could potentially be, well, that is an actual issue. So those are two details that have to be mentioned, irregardless to our sugya, irregardless to our sugya. And the last detail that has to be mentioned, which I don't think we're actually going to get to today, which is, let's say, a warming draw. Maybe at the end we'll just mention something. Is that there's always, anytime you talk about electronic appliances, there's always a level of mindfulness that is needed with regarding the electricity. With regarding, is it a Shabbos appliance? Is every time I'm opening the door, a light turning on? No, I took out the bulb. Okay, but is every single time something else happening? And it could be it's a psik resha that is nichale that you want to happen. So those are side issues anytime we deal with an electric appliance have to be dealt with. Have to be dealt with, and that is disclaimer number 3. With those 3 disclaimers, let's try to dive into Sif Gimel Sif Hey, which is Nesinah lechatchila. There's one detail that we spoke about last time that we have to wrap up, which is we spoke about pina lemecham lemecha, and we spoke about the fact, and I still would love if anyone could find the Torah how we have this vast discrepancy between the Shartzion and Ramesha, and what in the world is going on over here? Mamish, both ends of the spectrum, both of them almost forgiving themselves for even mentioning it because it's so pashit one way or so pashit the other way. I don't know. But one thing I do want to mention, which Rishon Zalman in a footnote talks about, and as soon as I can find it, I'll let you know where the footnote is, which is we're talking beklalius of pina lemecham lemecham. But when is it a case of pina lemecham lemecham? Is itself a shayla? Meaning, is it only if it's going through an intermediary, which we'll call a klisheni, which we'll call your urn, into a cup of water, now into the next? Is that the only case? Which is, I think it's in Sif Gimel here. Is that the only? Yeah, it's right over here. Is that the only case that is the shayla? Meaning, and this, of course, has to do with your chalent is burning. How could you add water to the chalent on Shabbos? So, is the whole shayla of pina lemecham lemecham only when I'm taking the water, putting it into a cup, and then pouring it into my chalent? Or is the shayla anytime there's a transfer to another pot? Now, um, this is a contested point. What was the second point? Maybe it's just any time the item is going into another pot. The water is going from pot A into pot B. So you're doing pina me mecham to another mecham, even if it's a kli rishon. Is it only a kli sheni, or is it even a kli rishon? I would love to find this. Where is it in his notes? Do you know this? I'm sorry. I forgot that I wanted to talk about this. Give me one more moment. Let's see if we can find the cookies. Here, right here. You remind. Second. Okay, I don't know. I can't. Ah, here it is. Here it is. So, Zalman in Ha'ara Mem Tes. Ha'ara Mem Tes. That's in Parak Aleph, Ha'ara Mem Tes. Zalman wants to taina that this is not part of it, that the Shaila. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. Look at that Har. Look at that Har. I'll read you one line. He says as follows. He says, Lo mistaver klal lesser lahavir samayim al deirei letocha kedera shalish. He basically wants to come along. He's glad to makel even if you put into klisheni. He's makel even in that case, but he quotes the fact that the Mishnah Brura is makel in the Shartzin Mem Zayin. But it would seem that even the machmirim are really only being machmir if it goes through the intermediary of a kli sheni. That's what it would seem. That's what it would seem, and not if it's going directly into a kli rishon. I'm just going to leave that as a marmakaim. That Rishon Zalman. Again, that's in Parak Aleph Ha'ara Mem Tes. Parak Aleph Ha'ara Mem Tes. Okay, let's move on to. Let's move on to Nesinah Chachil. So what is this Isser Nesinah Chachil? Again, we're going to use the case. We're going to be basically playing with two cases which we know don't have bishul issues and don't have nailit issues, which is either going to be a chala or a kugel. Those are going to be the two cases. These are the two cases that are some Zalman dons extensively. We're going to be discussing either a chala from your counter and trying to heat it up Shabbos morning, or a kugel from your, hopefully not your counter, but from your fridge, I guess, and heating it up as well. So, what is the Isser? What is the Isser? So again, we said we're not dealing with Isser Bishul. And again, I can't reiterate that enough times. So what is the Isser? The Isser is Chazar. You're violating one of the Tanoim of Chazara. What Tanai are you violating, right? So let's understand this. The flame is covered. So you have Gar V'Katum. You definitely don't have Das, right? Because it came from your fridge. Definitely don't have Vayta B'Yadai, because it didn't start on your hand. So you definitely are lacking in those two tonight. And it's also not cham b'mixes, as it's freezing cold. So you're really lacking in three of the critical conditions of chazara. Again, it might sound weird to call it chazara, but what is chazara? Anytime you put, whenever I go to a flame, whether it's covered or not, and I put something onto that flame, that is a potential isser chazara. So now, every time I'm walking to a flame, I have to ask myself: number one, is the flame covered? Number two, did I have das? Number three, is this fully cooked? Number four, is it oida biyadai? And number four, is it cham b'mik? Number five, is it cham b'mixes? Those are 5 to 9 on chazara. Now over here, anytime I'm coming from my fridge to the flame, I'm lacking in 3 critical tanayim, and therefore the pashtus is it is usr. Pashtus is it is usr. And the question is, what would be a case potentially to mitigate this? And the problem obviously is that Sifhei comes along, and Sifhei tells us that there is going to be a way that you could put something and warm it up, even though you're lacking in these 3 tonight. So what's the case of Sifhei? The case of Sifhei is that you're putting it on top of a pot, on top of a flame. That's the case. Be very careful with what the case in Sifhei is. Let's read it together. As Mr. Bura and the Bir Halacha explains. What? The stira between Sif Gimel and Sifhei. Excuse me, you're right. I should be reading. No. No. Mutter latzna pikdeiros cham b'Shabbos tafshit mach me'er b'Shabbos kol tzarek yom pandish giyos ben l'cham man lefi she'in derech bishul b'kach. So what are you doing? You're warming up your pandish on Shabbos. Why is it allowed? Because ein derech bishul b'kach. Says the Rama, avoid in shasal anicha gabikira afilu gufa ktuma. Why? So atira lechazarik there shanzbar, as we've seen. V'yish matirim. Okay, so comes on the Bir Halacha, and the Bir Halacha in Sif Gimel says whether you like to ask it as a stira, whether you rather point out the discrepancy between Sif Gimel and Sif Hey. I believe it's semantics. But in Sif Gimel, it said you can't do anything. Over here, it says you could. So what's going on? Says the Bir Halacha v'Yizayir. And this Bir Halacha is really, this both terutzim in the Bir Halacha are very important. Bir Halacha has 2 terutzim. Let's learn to this Bir Halacha, because Bir Halacha is going to tell us what potentially is mutter, what potentially is aser. And of course, before we even start the Bir Halacha, let's just point out the Mishnah Brura on Pei Zayin that explains what's the problem. Says the Mishnah Brura, Ratzah Leimar, so he said it's aser hasam tam misham the nirek kemivashel b'Shabbos the derech bishul b'kach. So Mishnah Berurah over here in Tzevei, he says, why is chazar normally aser? Because a mechzik kemivashel. Avalacha ein derech bishul b'kach al yidei hefsik kedera ve'ein nirek kemivashel. End of heter of the Mishnah Berurah. So a normal yid that reads a Mishnah Berurah, he doesn't know anything about Bir Halacha, doesn't know much. What does he come out with? He comes out with that the only time I could put my challah or my kugel and heat it up on Shabbos is where? On top of a pot of food. Where is that pot of food? Very particular. Where is it? Anyone? On a fire. Is it on a blech on a fire? We have no reason to assume that. Thank you. It's on a fire. It's on a fire. So one thing we know for sure is that on top of, let's say, my crack pot, lamashal, can I go and put my chal on top of it? Of course. That is a sif in Shulchan Aruch. Sifik. No shayla about that. Irrespective of the blech. Exactly. That is a sif in Shulchan Aruch. It's a pot of. Read the Mishnah that he learned that for yourself. How could he learn that? The Gamakir could be referring to besides the pot. Oh, he's going in. When is it? We learned that Chazar is Aser unless you have all the Tanayim. Hasam, he's explaining the Hasam. Over the Hasam, he's giving you what the Tanayim are. But over here, you don't need the Tanayim. Why don't you need the Tanayim? Because it's a Hafsik there. And by the way, this is a Davar Muska, what I just said. No one argues on what I just said, I believe. And if you have a pot of food, even if the pot of food is directly al ha'esh, you're allowed to put something on top of that to heat up. Again, a challah, a kugel. We're not talking about any other examples. I'll just mention a public service announcement. Many of you did learn this about their new tachlis. Can you make French toast out of that challah? French toast means you soak it in milk. Is there aluminum foil? So my brain says, of course, it's aluminum foil, right? We put challah directly on top. So this is why don't judge other people based on your household stupidities, right? So when someone asked me this once in Shabbos, he said, "Can he put his challah?" He had two shells. Shell number one. This is your break in the middle of shir. One likes a breather in the middle of shir. This is the breather. He put it into his milchig toaster after he warmed it up on top of his cholent. Number two is, can you mix it with milk? Mix it with milk. So I said, almost flippantly, right, there was a piece of foil in between, right? And he said, no, I just put the challah directly on top. So what I really wanted to ask him was, I don't care. I don't. No, I would say, Yishlatin, if that's gonna be the mile of the myriad, if there's no foil in between, things are getting scary. That's I'd rather hear what you're saying, but yeah, but if there's one dot of rative, you're over. If there's one dot of rative on the cover, it's over. Why isn't it? Why not? I the same guy that puts the challah directly on top without a piece of foil. How do I know that there wasn't a dot of liquid of it? Even on that cracker, I'm not so convinced. Maybe he flipped it over, but people do. No, maybe no. You don't have to be chayshish for anything. But your question is if he knows what's going on in that type of crackpot. With let's say he put what I'll tell you, what a lot of people do is they keep the cover this way or this way, and then they flip it, and then they put the food on. No, again, this guy has no clue. The guy just has a piece of challah. He wants to know can he eat it. For someone, I'll say it this way, for someone who knows what they're talking about, yes, you want to know if you have a perfectly dry thing and a dry item on top of it. Yes, I'm not concerned. But on the guy asking, yeah, I'm saying out of that crack, but actually think if you put in a crack, obviously. Okay, no. Either way, so he said he doesn't have a thing, and I asked him, by the way, was it by the crack of the thing? Which actually gets me nervous because if he has that crack, he's probably wondering what I stood on the wall, doesn't know what's going on. But either way, he's like, I don't know. So I told him, so if it was in the milchig toaster, Madinai.
But after
it's done. He takes it out of the milchig toaster. Can he eat it?
The toaster's clean.
Can he eat the bread?
Toaster clean. Was toaster oven or toaster like?
Can you put cheese on top of it? Okay, weiter. What? Can't do cheese.
I think you eat the bread. You can't do cheese.
Can't do cheese. You eat the bread. Okay, this is your homework to think about, and let's move on. So, how in the world did we get here? Oh, because this case, L'Kuli Alma is mutter. I believe you're right. By the way, I believe you're right. I believe the answer is even if your toaster is not fully clean, I don't think we would aser up the bread. I don't think you actually have mashis of cheese in there. That's gonna maybe you do. Yeah, I know. We're all thinking about our Dira toaster, which has more things growing in the bottom. Yeah, I know, but I don't know. I think it. What? Yeah, that's a different story. I think don't keep the cover on when you heat things up. I think the bread pashtus is mutter, and to put cheese in it, pashtus should be avoided. Okay, back to us. So that is one case that l'chayra everyone agrees. That's Mishnah Berurah. We go back to the Biur Halacha. Let's learn a Biur Halacha together. So really, today's shares we're going to learn a Biur Halacha, and then we're going to learn some Zalman, and that's basically the whole thing. V'daita lahachzir. Hine mashma tavas l'chomer b'yibayis b'yis la. L'zeh Gemara. I'm reading the wrong Biur Halacha. V'yizar shlo yasin. Timi nichan agavi karka. Ein al zeh shem chazar k'shortz anicham achriga. Tchilas anach damya v'aser blah blah blah. L'chayra soiser mechaber zatzma. Why? They're like, come on. No, I didn't just blah 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 the Biur Halacha. I just meant fill in the blanks so we get to the next part. I'm sorry, that wasn't appropriate. L'chayra. There's how much sugar did you put in this tea? There's sugar in here, right? I wasn't excited. Splendor sugar. Splendor sugar. Wow. L'chayra soiser mechaber zatzma. Come say, hey, hetik latinas the Biur Rash, which would be say Shem Aran. Shkasu b'shmayim. Sham the motel litin lechatzchila b'shabts. By the way, there it's explicit. The kedera tachtoina is al ha'eish. Kiven she mafsekas umamera kedera leha ein derech bishul bekach. Va'adifa mikira gufa ktuma. V'vikema min neged hamadura the mutter af b'shabes imu mavashel kol sarkei. Beautiful, but it's nicer to what he says here in Sifkim. So how do we answer this? So now, he says a Daglam Ravava, that I'm going to come back to in one moment, because he says the Darug Mervava, he says it's a Daichik, and therefore he says Achach Matzasi the Pri Megadim, Sheisha Zu Akasha B'Tov V'Tam. So if you want to know the psak of Rabbeinu HaChafetz Chaim is like the Pri Megadim. He says, "Udisevei she'ayri b'mezag abi kedera chamen oitavsh." Lo nechshav klal kemen agabi kira. Ulahachi mutter avlit in the chatchil. Mashen giving you niner she'erei konis. V'aymed is rak list time es chaim akira. She'kol kachoim nasa akira. I did say rak kishakira gufak tuma. That's the time shav sav shal chatchil. Ube'emes. Right. So what is the psak of the Bir Halacha? That on top of a pot of food, it's mutter. On top of a blech, what is the psak of the Bir Halacha? It's awesome. Atkan.
Even Kedera, that's just there.
But again, a kedera rekonis that he's talking about, I don't want to be confused, because when we use the words kedera rekonis, we think of an overturned pan on top of your blech. So don't get confused, because Sif Gimel is not that. Sif Gimel is just a kedera rekonis, which is a blech in English. And also, by the way, when you read the Hebrew, you get very confused in the cases, so be careful. That is psak of the Bir Halacha. And I know I skipped the Dagla Mervava for a very pointed reason. Rabbeinu Agadol, Hashem Zalman Arbach, in multiple letters to, I don't know whom, the Sefer Mara Shabbos, the letters are to him. He is the shayl. Oh, that's Meritic. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Okay. He basically, as we'll see in a few moments, he bombards Hashem Zalman with letters, with like, he writes like 5 pages. Hashem Zalman writes back 2 lines in every one of his letters. So we're going to get there in a moment. But even before we get to the juicy part of it, we really could start with the Shmir Shabbos. Every Yid owns a Shmir Shabbos, obviously. And every Yid, if you want to know what to do on Shabbos, you open your Shmir Shabbos. That's what you do. That's what you do. And, I mean, you probably should go see a Rav, but let's say you don't have one. So says the Shmir Shabbos. This is in Perek Aleph, Sif Tezvav, and Sif Chaf. 2 different times. Actually, no, I want to, let's get to the Chiddush in one moment. Let's get to the Chiddush in one moment. We'll get to the, I'm sorry, let's build properly. We'll get to this Chiddush in one moment. First of all, what about placing a non-food pot? A non-food pot, right? So what's the answer? The answer is that's ridiculous, because Sifhei taught us.
Did you pause the video?
Wow. A non-food pot. Yeah.
In English.
An empty pot in English, yes. Yeah, an empty pot in English. An empty pot in English. I don't actually. I'm yelling about the Shmir Shabbos. I'm not Shmir Shabbos here. 1 second. What's the serious? Shmir Shabbos.
They're all actually one.
Yeah.
Do you see that one?
No, I'm not.
Thank you. Thank you. Islam, this is yours. Comes with your flower pot. Oh, boy. Rough day in the office. In Perek Aleph, Harakuf Chavav. Harakuf Chavav. So Shalom Zalman discusses, can I take just an empty pot? So everyone here is saying that's totally ridiculous, right? Because Sifhei said it has to be a pot of food. And by the way, that is exactly how Rav Elyashiv Paskins, he says, no, if it's an empty pot, it doesn't work. Said Rav Elyashiv, what if it's an empty pot on top of another empty pot? He says, great, that's like taking a blech with a blech. It still doesn't work. Said Rav Elyashiv, what if it's an empty pot on top of a blech? He said, Nachamol, that's like taking a blech on top of a blech. What are you hacking me a chinik? It doesn't work. Rav Nissen Karelitz says the exact same thing. He says, I'm going to get to you back in a minute. What? What's wrong?
I believe alone.
If who alone?
Yeah, I'm just trying to learn. You're asking questions.
Exactly. He says, go learn Sifhei and leave me alone. Rav Nissen Karelitz Chotshani says the same thing in Chelik Beis, on page 129, Divrei Masav V'Nireh. He says, the svara mutal aniach lechatchila gabi kedera maleo amez al eish is why shem shalyoina mitbashelesh machmas hakedira hayimedes al eish. Listen to the lumdis from this incredible says, because we should ask yourselves a question: What's the lumdus of sifhei? What's the lumdus of the heter? If we want to know, can I put an empty pot? We have to understand, how does sifhei work? So maybe I would have suggested what the Mishnah Berurah said in Pei Zayin as one reason, as we'll get to maybe in a moment. But the Gedolei HaPoskim say no. It's very simple. It's a full pot. So when I put my challah on top of my challah pot, where is the challah getting heated up from? From the challah pot, and not v'loi mina eish atzma. It's not getting heated from the eish. Masha ain't kain b'kedei reikanis. It's an empty pot. Shekadei rahal yoina mitbashelas min ha'eish ve'alser. He's saying you need to have a food to absorb the heat, and then the food on top is warmed by that absorbent heat, and that is the reason why it is mutter. As Zakram Nesikrel Zulfiza, Ein Chelik Ben Kederi Kanas Achas, Oikam Kederi Kanoit, to Saif Hamalea Mitbasha Hamalea. No, I don't know how you say that word. The top one, Mitvashelas Min Aish Atzma, is being cooked from the food itself. It happens to be even Rafalk. Even Rafalk says a kedere kanis al blach can't do. Says you can't do. Says you can't do it. It's a Simon Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says a pot of food you can't do it.
Again, when you say you're talking about a regular right side up there.
No, I'm talking about my my pot without food on top of a blach, on top of a flame.
What does that mean?
There's no cover. You're not talking about the cover.
Meaning it means you're putting your food in
Put it in the pot.
No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. As we'll see very clearly from Roshon Zalman, how he spells out the heter. But they're discussing, I take a pot, I flip it over, there's no food inside of it. Here's a blech. This is the worst visual in the history of the world. Here's a blech, and I put the food on top. Zakrim Nisi Kraus, you know it's a problem? Because my food is being heated by what? From the ish on the bottom. There's an overturned pot, who cares? It's not doing anything for me. It's still getting heated straight from the ish. Masha'in kain, if there's a pot of food, here's my tea, and it's on top of something, and then I put something on top of it, now it's being heated from the food. That's how they learn. Comes along Rosh Zalman in Ha'ara, Kof, Vav, Kuf Chavav. Now, he quotes, I don't know who he quotes. Rabbi David says, is there a Kabbalah when he quotes me, Pi Chacham Echad? Who's he quoting?
Yes.
That's who he's quoting?
So,
Really? Even though Rabbi Yashiv,
I don't know. No, maybe that was implicit.
you don't know. Okay, I actually don't know many times in Shmir Shabbos that he quotes me Pi Chacham Echad. I don't know. But over here in Ara Kuchavav, he says, if you go, first of all, before you go into Ara, what's the halacha he's talking about? It's in Sif Mem Dalet. He says, what should you do? You want to get something heated up. He says, you have two pots on top of each other. So he's talking about a case like this. You have pot A on top of pot B, and you want to eat pot A. So now what do you do with pot B? So can you put it back down? He says, no, put it on top of a different pot. Let's say you don't have another pot. Ein lo kedei rezu, yaniach afilu b'shabes kedei reika, oy salachat matechet, oy tavnet afiyah hafucha al gabe haish. Flip it over al gabe haish. V'yaniach as kedei al yoina o le ha. That we said. So comes along in Ha'ara Kuchavav, and he says, Tuadin, we're in the second line. Mutter gam chatzchila laniach b'Shabbos salachat hafucha chedayim al gabi kira. Before the Picha Chomechad. We're going to get there in a moment. You don't have a pot of food. You're allowed to flip over a pan. Right? We read the Mishnah Berurah Beis Zayin. What did the Mishnah Berurah? Why did he say the heter is ein derech bishul bekach? Ayin oid to Mishnah Gimel Gimel. Now ayin oid in Shmir Shabbos means what? He's asking a kasha. So frakter Shlomo Zalman. Go look in the Bir Halacha. Go look in the Geraz and Kashi Achroim. Go look in the Chazon Ish. How could I say what I just said? Let's ask it from the Bir Halacha. How did the Bir Halacha asking that it only works if it's a pot of food? So how could I say to go turn an overturned empty pot? Frakter of Shlomo Zalman, Vishamati, again, I'm saying for some Zalman, Rav Neubert, a chleisish. V'shamati mi pi chacham echad. The dafka, and again, this is the first time we're hearing this. Im hamed as a kadira horeka al gabe ish giluya. Sounds familiar? That's called Sif Gimel. K'dei lasa din guva ktuma. Aval ima ish kivar hoisa mechusa. If the fire is already covered, which we were not talking about in Sif Hey. V'hu ma'amin es a kadira. So why am I putting my tabnit afiyafucha? Why am I putting my slachat matechet? Why am I putting all these random items on top of my blech? To then put something on top of it, it's l'shanois miderech habishol. Odif tfei zok the chacham echad or shem ezalmin paskins Rab Neubert. That is better than the case of the bir halacha. V'shari likule alma. Avsha kadir reika. V'imkein hu adinami legabi slach lavucha agabi guf oktuma ad kan devarov. And then he says, V'ra lashon v'alacha now shekadira reika ho'umda rakti l'mayis achoyim. When he explains Sif Gimel, he says over there the issue is that the empty pot is there for what purpose? Just to be memayit achoyim. But if you're putting the empty pot not just to be memayit achoyim, but rather to lower the heat, rather, well, that was stupid. Rather to be making it not to Mexican mevashel zokor shemizalmin, it is mutter. This is the first and perhaps last place that we find this heter of Rishon Zalman. Not last, the Shevet HaLevi says the same thing, and he says the Chazon Ish is machmir in this precise case because Lafia Chazon Ish, it's not a hefsek at all, and therefore nothing works. But he says Lafi mina ka'olam gam kim nishtana hadin, and therefore he says in mutter. Now Shevet HaLevi writes a bissel verbose. I think this is the tshuva. Chelik Aleph Siman Sadi Aleph Devrei Maslim Achar. I did not look it up. I apologize. You can look it up. But I want to quote one line from him. He says, "To the Rapasha that if Kedei Reikos al Gabe Eish, that's if Gimel. That's where we say Dibal al Gabe Kira. Avkshapach. Now listen to his words. Gadol al Gabe Kira umesim oid b'soich hapa Kedei Reikonis." Meaning, he's trying to portray a case, especially in the world of Shevet HaLevi, they don't have a blech in their house. So how are we going to do this? So he says, if you take the massive soup pot and you put that on top of the ish, so that is called sif gimel. What is that soup pot? That's called grufa ktuma. That's called a blech. And then inside of it, you put another empty pot. And he says, she'enoi mut emes klau legoydel akira chiyetzbay, meaning it's no shayches. Pashem ma'oidi davar nefrad b'fnei atzmai, mufsak me'akira, and therefore that you're going to allow to put on the same food like Shlomo Zalman, just paskint.
That's your chum podcast.
I don't know. Maybe yeah, maybe no, perhaps. I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying. I thought maybe also. I'm not sure. And the Lashain is a little bit hard. So right now, we have a heter Shlomo Zalman on a blech with an overturned pan. The next step is, what about a plata with an overturned pan? Plata with an overturned pan. So that's kol shekin. It's going to be mutter, right? It's kol shekin. It's kol shekin. It's kol shekin. But now the question is, why? Because a plata already is out of the world of a mechsi. Perhaps we're going to get to that's going to be the last step. But if you have an overturned pan on top of it, an overturned pan on top of plata, l'chayra. Again, this is all given to what we said prior. It's going to be the same din as an overturned pan. Again, a plata with one setting. Again, a plata that has the heterim lefi those who are mekel. If you put an overturned pan on top of that, you'll have the same heter as the Shlomo Zalman is giving us, even al gabi aish, just even al gabi aish with a blech. But now things really go awry when we want to go to the next step. What's the next step? So I'll be very honest and transparent. I always thought the sugya stopped here. I thought the sugya stopped here. I know that there's a Shlomo Zalman that's mekel on an overturned pan on top of a blech. I know that there's a Bir Halacha that sounds like he's Machmir. Shem Zalman is explaining that he could be Mekel in this case, and Ad Kan Devarif. Now you want to know, can I put something directly onto a blech or directly onto a plata? So the answer, l'chayra, is no. Even if you're going to be mekel, even let's go into a plata for a moment, and we're not going to focus so much, but even if you're going to be mekel, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. L'chayra, we don't have a marmakim to be more mekel than the hefsek kinera. Why? Because now you're not out of the world of hefsek kimabash. The one case that we all know, 1 second, is Ramesha. Ramesha says, what about to put it mamish on the end? You have a blech, and you have an area that's not yad soiledes boy. Now, by the way, what does that mean? That means you could stick your hand on it. You could hold your hand, which is mamish. I mean, I don't know. I guess you have like one flame on and you have a big blech because the heat really, moves. But the area that's mamish not yad soiledes boy says Ramesha in Aleph Sadi Dalid and in Dalid Ayin Dalid on the base, he says, Davka amakum she'i efshel love boy lide yad seiledis. Afilu kshi sham kolayim mutter. Aval makum she'im zman sham zman gadol yad seiledis. Also, so what is that? That's like mamish the edge of your bluff. And what's it really going to do for you? By the way, is it going to do anything?
Make it
Make it a little bit more than room temperature, I guess.
From the fridge, it'll take.
Yeah, get rid of the thought. We'll thought. Yeah, it's got the lashon lahafik sinasi. It's lashon southern place. Yeah, okay. Which, by the way, I just my nerves already get a little bit nervous over here. We're in the world of a Mexican mavashal. We're in the Mishnah Bura Peizayin. How do we get out of the Mechzi? We get out of the Mechzi that we put something odd, and you're putting something on top of something weird. I see someone going over to a blech on Shabbos. I know what's going on. We know there are places you want to be machmir if my oven is off. My oven is off, we spoke about, right? You can fire up your oven on Erev Shabbos, and I want to come home Friday night, and I want to put mechal in an oven that's off. It's warm, but it's off. And there are places you want to say it's ulcer. Why is it ulcer? Because, hello, you're putting something into an oven. So I would have thought that you're putting something on top of a blech, it's ulcer. It's flame, it's no flame. Again, we could argue. I'm just telling you a svara. I would have been nervous. It's not a psak. So, Ramesha is in Aleph Sadi Dalid, and again in Dalid, Ayin Dalid, Lamed Beis. But Ramesha is telling us this case is mutter, grada. In this case, Rav Yashiv says what I just said in Shotz Yitzchak, Chelik Beis, page 74. He comes along, says, Davar Chiddush Ulachalik, Makim Shini Yachal Avi the Yad Zledes, Mishar Tanor, Elakol Tanor B'Chal Iser, Il Gabi Apach, Shein Kulan Makam Megudar, Kemotech Shaltanor, Nira Shashem Kira, Kulai Ve'ein Mechalkim Makam Makam. And again, I understand that's far God. Yes, what's your question before we go back to?
Back on Shlomo's head to go over to the top. So we saw two reasons that we went through why this should be the problem. Number one, there's Maxi, which is a Zion, and then the other one, which is that the fact that the heat is coming from the full pot underneath.
Okay, yeah.
So Shlomo's head to speak to both of those points.
It's a good question. We don't know. We don't know the answer to that question. Meaning, Shlomo Zalman has not yet spoken to us and told us why he's willing to be mekel. Meaning, the Paiskim who are machmir and said sifei, they learn along this has to do with the food. So is there Shlomo Zalman saying it doesn't have to do with the food? It would sound that way, unless maybe he says there's a level, and it sounds like he is saying this. There's a level that's just so bizarre. You don't need the fact that it's coming from the food. When do you need the fact that it's coming from a food? When there's an aish and there's a pot of food and you're putting it on top of there. So if you have an aish with just an empty pot and you're putting it on top of there, that doesn't work. Mashenki, it's like Rishon Zalman. If I have an aish and then I have a blech and then I have a pot and then I have my food, it's like Rishon Zalman. That's so bizarre. It could be mutter. But again, we don't have direction. But now the question is, what about putting something directly on top of a blech on Shabbos?
back to how hard of
Maybe at that. Maybe. I don't know. Read the words of the Again Egalo. Salachat matechet etavnet afiyah hafucha. That's it. I will answer your question.
The cookie sheet.
No.
That's not it. Yeah.
Yes. No. It's a baking pan. It's a baking pan. Salachat matechet is a metal plate. His point is it can't look normal. It's very balabatish what he's saying.
But if it dips and actually touching.
Right. So that's the problem. The problem is when you start with all the shtick, then it doesn't really work. Someone goes, I don't know if it looks abnormal even. At some points, it doesn't even look abnormal. It just looks like a lot of food stuffed on top of your blech. And then there's somewhere on the bottom, there's that guy in the bottom of the pile up that's not being able to breathe. It's like the little thing on there. I don't know. Also, I've seen people, they take like 3 knives. They like lie down 3 knives,
Can you see that?
and then they put their pot on top of it. It's great answer, right? Chayr, it's usher.
It's all about.
Clear, it's usher.
It's all about looks and Kadosh.
Why is it usher?
That's weird. No one cooks on top of night.
No. It's weird, but
Can't see that.
it has to be a var. We're in the world of mechs. It has to be something. Has to be something normal.
Just about looks Kadosh. Siman.
That's what he says. Let's go to the next step. You should know this point. I believe one would say is I call if you ine hamayre, and I don't think there's a clearly defined answer. I do believe that once you do most of the things that are weird are going to be fine, and I think you could be a little inventive. You want to take a muffin tin. So there's parts bottom and the parts sticking up, and then you put that down. It gets very, very hot. You want to put something on top of that. I don't see a problem in that because nothing. Well, you have something on top of it. Also, muffin tins are very strong. Happens to be they hold a lot of weight and they don't crush underneath. You want to know if you take a cookie sheet, which is this thick, and you put it on top of your thing, and then you put all the food on top of it. By the time you finish, there's no more cookie sheet. It's just one flat piece of thing. That's called a blech. I don't think that would work. And all the case in between, but yeah. So comes along Rosh Zalman in multiple letters, and he really comes to say what he says over here in Shmir Shabbos. He says it also. We're gonna see it through the lens of the letters. The Sefer Binyan Ariel, and no clue who wrote this, but he quotes all these letters from the Mar Shabbos. But really, it's Siftes Vav. Let's go learn another Rosh Zalman. Parak Aleph Siftes Vav. So we know one answer, right? Comes in Siftes Vav. Let's read carefully. Davar lach. Shivavush called Targul let us out in the Gamri. Okay, we're not talking about the case. But Nech Samach Leish. Samach Leish. I feel Makshich Leschamik Teshi Atzlet. Keep going. Okay, this is what we need to know. Ala Michsa. Okay, all our Hebrew people over here, we need you on hand. Is Binyan real? Whoa.
The Russian Muslim is not going over.
Whoa, okay, that's a big deal. Okay, we're gonna see. We've seen in a few moments. It's a big deal because, yeah, it's a big deal. Okay, what, Rabbi Davis? What's a michsa shel kedera?
Cover of the pot.
Cover about. Okay, going. Al michsa kedera. I feel because you meant this al gabe haish. So you have a cover of a pot where al gabe haish. Oi al hapach hamichase es alahava shebekirai. A pot that covers the flame. Shaloi keneged haish. Oi, I feel it's unclear. So he is not talking here about an overturned pan on top of a blech. He's not. Gam dever yavesh, filut soinin legamri, mutter lanichai somuch laish, even if he gets the atzalah display. That's what he says in Tesvav. Comes along and again in Chavav. And again, these things we should look at carefully. We're gonna get there in one moment. Chavavi comes along and he says, so we have a kisui on top of an oven. This is a blech. Chavav is very explicit. I have a blech. I have one flame on in the blech. And I want to put something not on top of that flame. I want to put it over a little bit. We call area 2, part area B, zone 2, whatever you want to call it. So it's hot. It's piping hot. Of course. Yesh matirim, he says. You can't move it on top of the ish afterwards. So what just happened? Sounds like he just said, as Rabbi Katzer just pointed out, sounds like he just said the Dagel Mervava, the Ran. And in the letters, in the Mara Shabbos Chelik Aleph, Mara Shabbos Chelik Beis, he comes along and says to Shlomo Zalman, Again, first, Rav Yeller asked him a shayla. I'm not sure. There's a lot of shaylas here. 1 second. Let's get the right. Okay, let's just go through it. It's basically 3 letters from Shom Zalman. Let's just do this properly. Okay, first letter, or Davis, thank you. You brought in this farm over here to the Chelik Aleph, letter 9, Ois 14. He says, the Shayel asks as follows. This is Rav Yeller. Ois Shamati, I heard B'Shem Maran. Shamotul Aniach B'Shabbos Chal L'Chatz Chil Gabi Pacham L'Chasas Eish. You got to put a chal on top of the blech. Oil Gabi Plata Chashmalit, and you don't have to be worried about Lechzik and Mavashel. Ois Shamati Tam. So says Rabbi Adler, I can think of 2 conceivable reasons that the Rebbe was willing to be makel directly on top of the blech. After time, number 1, it's not normal to make a challah on top of your blech. And number 2, it's not even possible. There's no matzim avasha. So says Rabbi Adler, I heard the Rebbe was makel on a challah. But based on what I could think of your reasons, you know what I want to be makel near lahaisiv. I'm going to add on to the Rebbe's words. You could put a dry kugel that you take out of the fridge on top of the blech. You can't cook such a thing there. Says Hashem Zal ben Arbach. Nachain. Kivan shezeh yavish va'afoy. Ach toiv loy laniach mamish neged hoish. Ach toiv. Yeah, I was masking that also. But this is really what we just saw at the Shmir Shabbos in Tez Vav and Chavav. Is that Rishon Zalman is willing to be made to put something directly on top of the blech shaloi kinegish. Now, Rada, he ends off, he says, Valgabi plata chashmalit, he's more mefakvik, which is very interesting. Rishon Zalman is more nervous about the plata.
Everything there is connected.
Where? Oh, maybe that's the svara. Again, it's interesting to me because the only marmokim that we've had for these kulas where there's this entity called a plata that's not made for cooking. But Shem Zalman l'chayra, yes, is bothered like you were just saying. Is that there? It's called an eish. It's called a big griddle. And I'm a fact figure. He says, "Ve'ineni zeicha sheitarti." I don't remember that I was makel. Okay, he says, I know that this part of a makel. Okay, 1 letter. Next letter. He says, he's a makel. What does that mean? I don't know if that's going in the plata chashmalit. I don't know if that's going in the challah, but he's responding that I am makel in this case.
He says it in Har Lamed Geish.
That what?
He says exactly the same thing. That
No, that's something else. That's something else. That's something else. That's a raw. Something else. Can't read to Michael. It's a similar svara, but yeah. Okay, another letter. Right to be yavish legamri deloy mishkach shavali de iser tayra. V'gam davshin der klal afisham. V'gam shli can I get up to a mamish? V'nikr la kol shachimo meina el lahafik sina. That's what you were saying before. What are you doing there? Shabbos shari. And another letter says Hashem Zalman, and here he explains a little more. Hashem Zalman writes, "Ein repealing klal le'efois chalav ugois o kugel ala pach shalakira." No one in the world ever baked a challah, ever baked a kugel on the blech. He says, "Kemai." Let me read this a little slower. I'm sorry. Just like it's motor laniach lechatchila davar yavish, mevushal. Al mecham, which is the urn, shoimin mamish aleish sifhei. Just like we found Dr. Rebbe, that you're allowed to put something on a pot of food, on a flame sifhei. Mishom dafsak like a deira. Kivashain zem makom shirgin lavashel. Killed fei megufak two verses in the chesed ches. Hachinami benidon didon. So Shem Zalman is willing, seemingly, to be makel on the blach. Shaloi keneged aish. The $1 million problem is, this is almost verbatim the words of the Dagel Mervava. If we go back to our Bir Halacha, we go back to the first teretz. Says the Bir Halacha, Umatzasi b'Dagel Mervava shenitchik b'zeh v'kasav dashin mechaver samach atzmos faras haran tekiven she'ein pandish dar kila foisai al gabe kira yesh lahakol Since the pandish is not the derech, it's mamish yom skir of Zalman. Since it's ein regiling klal afla yisham.
Here's all H.
Yeah, that's
Whoa.
This is all H.
that's also
Whoa.
Dogma
Whoa,
is not
whoa.
all H.
Yeah, he's just saying you never put a baked item on top of a burger. Shlomo's Zalman saying everything that's summer, even though technically
Sif Gimel. So much Sif Gimel.
yeah.
Right, these are all out.
Sif Gimel is a clear kanas aleish.
Not all Sif Hey.
One more time. Say it again slowly.
Both of them are considered.
Kandish is what Machaber talking about Sif Hey.
Right, and there he's only meko al gabe a hefsek of food. Right,
Yeah,
This is all H.
because
Right.
the dogma
but there's food in it. In Sif Hey.
in
So something's not connecting with
when the beer halacha brings down the sheet of the dogma of
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and he rejects it.
Yeah.
He said the dogma of Svara was that no one actually cooks this baked item directly on top of a burger. Right?
Right.
So where Shlomo Zalman's head there is not that, oh, no one ever cooks directly on top. He's saying you can only do snicha. Or stuff.
And again. You're ready. You're ready at the answer. Slow.
Yeah.
Slow. Because it is a kasha. You're saying a chilik. It's definitely a kasha. Again, before we start Shem Zalman being made on top of a blach, before Shem Zalman said that, any normal person who learned the Bir Halacha sees that the Dagam Rav, I understand the Dagam Rav is saying that case. But what is the one case that the Prima Gadol is willing to give in? Is Afsekadira al Gabi Ablach. No one ever said, but if it's Gabi Ablach, but it's not normal, then it could be okay. The whole svara of just not being normal is the svara of the Ran.
It's not, but it's not. Shlomo Zalman says it's not normal, and it's also not directly agave ish. That's what he specified in the
Again, slow. You're jumping to the next step. Before we have Rosh Hashanah, when we learn to Bir Halacha, what does the Bir Halacha say? The Dagam Ravava is the one that is willing to create svaros that it's not normal in this area or not. And the feed of Dagam Ravava, one could say, they could take it to the next step, like Rosh Hashanah says maybe not in that case. Basically, slow. They asked Rosh Hashanah this kasha. It's not my kasha. Michtav achroin. What happens is Rabbi Adler doesn't relent. And Rabbi Adler in the last letter says, V'osafti l'shol l'goyin Rosh Hashanah. Mashkosa Maran Shlita. Harein Rikidin Klal Lefetz Chal Vugis O Kugel Al Pash Al Kira Chulu. Sarchian. To the Chayra Harezem Mamish Svaras Agagol Mervava. Shedach Abir Halacha B'Sim Reish and Gimel Al Piyah Beisid Move Magen Avram Sivkat Al Lamadal. That's his kasha. And then he quotes the Lashon Abir Halacha that we just read together. If you look at the Ran himself, the Beis Yosef tied it on the Ran. The Ran himself wasn't so willing to be makel. And how are you taking Dagam Mervav the next level? So now, that is what the final letter to Rosh Hashanah Arbach was. Rosh Hashanah now responds. Misara Svara. Near Lini Yastaiti. Shemotel Afsar Tab. And this is interesting. Well, maybe I have to get back to this. He says, Misara Svara. It's near. If you're able to be machzir, listen to his contrast. If you're able to chazara of a tafshil or mayim, shaloi nitztanein legamri. So his contrast was, let's say I take a soup off the flame, and it's now lukewarm. Lukewarm is going to be together. It's warm-ish. Lo nitztanein legamri. Can I go put it back? Yeah. It's pochos miyad salad this way. Says Rosh Zalman, if that's mutter, you have to understand what in the world this contrast is. Kol shekein the mutter chalois v'ugay shenikar she'ein zel efois rak l'chameman. Certainly you could put on a challah or cookies or your kugel that's not normal to warm it up, not normal to bake, only to warm. V'lo sheich l'zetera klal uklal. Ach, kivan sheme'achroinin chutz midagam rabava. Mashvok sasra oisrim hineni chayzer mimasha amarti shemot. That's how he ends the letter. Now, we have a problem because Shmir Shabbos seemingly.
You says
When was
what was written first?
Okay. So comes along the Binyan Ariel. We just found out is Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, and says the Binyan Ariel. He quotes this last letter, and he says Vinirali Barer. This is Rav Zalman Nechemia. This itself is a marmakum, right? Okay. Vinirali Barer. Sha'amar Kain says Rav Zalman Nechemia. Rak mishom anvisanusoi. How do we teach anvisanusoi? Yeah, this is where we get into the Yeah. Now, before we go weiter, Grad on the bottom, he says, Ukein, that which Rav Nevinsol says, Sharabu Yisham Azal Mitzavar at Soif Yamov. He gives another Mar Malkum. That Rav Nevinsol says, Nevinsol is still with us? Baruch Hashem. And Meir Besrim. How old is he? Can I know? Zakar Nevinsol, until Soif Yam, you know Sham Zaman held, She'ain Ba'alokas Chashmal Loyesh Isser. This is Mamish just hack. Isser Daraisa cloud. Even though at the end of his life he seemed to whatever. Okay. Right. Says Reb Zamnachami Goldberg. Void. She'etzati is a nice lefnei Rav Nevinsol. Amar Li. Sha'af al pi shel shama pasik zeh mirab Yisham Zam. I never heard it. Kol makom asvar noisenes she mutter lahachzer lechatchilo davar yavish mavusha kol tzarkoi davar shein darkei litbashel afis kain at kan farf. Chein sha'alti yes. The Heilige Shmir Shabbos from Neubert. Linian zeh. V'gam kain hayra lemaisa shem mutter. Chein amar li hagarav agayin Rav Simcha bunim kon the same thing. Now it seems there was a change in the two different. Yeah.
No, so it can't be without time. I made a mistake.
What?
We'll find out. We'll look into it.
Look into it. Yeah. No. It's. I'm so silly. I have his name.
Snake.
It's not Zam Nechemia. It's a real Mike.
Leo.
Mike.
How to spell it?
Man, you did cook.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Scratch that. It's not Zam Nechemia. Whomever it is. Okay. I was actually wondering, to be honest, I was wondering why like he's quoting everyone. Like, dude, you're allowed to give an opinion on the matter now. I could say, dude, because it's not him. But Lamaisa,
It's a different thing.
he's quoting Allah Gedalim that are Mekel. Now, one last tshuva is Rav Yisrael Yankiv Fisher. The Heilige Evan Yisrael. Oh, good. You have to say that. He on the bottom there. Rav Yadler has the Torah, but we're really running out of time. Rav the Evan Yisrael, Yisrael Yaakov Fisher, comes along, and he says, Oh, so he's talking about a different case. He says, what if you have the original case which Shimzan was talking about? What if you have a case that you have two layers in your plata? Okay? Classical, big Suda, get the bottom layer, get the top layer. And then you lower the bottom layer. What do you do with the top layer? So Shimzan said you can't put it straight down. That was the case that he was willing to say, but you can flip over a pen. Yeah, everyone told you the case. Says we saw Fisher. He says he's willing to be mekel. If it started on the top, it can go straight down onto the blech. He says, how long does it have to be there? He says, no such thing. It's not telling him zman. Says Yisrael Yaakov, and move on. Meaning he wants to know, this is a Gavaldik Eitzah. He wants to learn anything that starts on a blech could be moved on to a blech. This is similar to what we saw last week. We saw the Rashitais that said that you let it go from area C to area B. And the Shell's wait, can I now put a pole stick and go from B to A? And somebody said, no, that's too far. So you have to fish and grab the holes. No, of course you could. And therefore you could have a maifis. What? So in this case, he's talking about it was there before Shabbos.
I feel like that's spindish, meaning because it was there before Shabbos, that's the heter. Meaning it doesn't make a difference now. It was put there before Shabbos.
Again. It depends on where in what iteration we're talking about. But I agree with what you're saying. Let's get back there in 1 minute. I agree with what you're saying. Let's go talk about that in 1 minute. He says, just they ask him why the place give this 8. He says, move on. He says, what do you mean? He says, you're allowed to have a chiddush in life. That's what he paskins. Finally, he quotes over here other Gedolei Eretz Yisrael that also are willing to be mekel. So I'm basically finished. I'm still a little bit, I guess the word is confused because
I'm going from the second layer to on the guard.
Yeah.
After guard cut.
He's going from layer 2. He's going layer. No, he's not calling it Nesinah L'Chatchila. The Chiddush is it's a mashal. Leave that case to the side right now. Leave that case to the side right now. It doesn't really help us right now. What are you saying? It depends on when it was put on and what the story is. But again, it was he quotes it as a mashal to this lack of mechsi. We have another case that's out of the mechsi, so we're more makeup. Well, let's leave that aside for a moment. But Lamaisa, I think this is where the sugya ends. What's Halacha Lamaisa? I have nothing to add. I think we see everything over here. And Seif Kol Seif, if someone wants to know, Tachlis, can I put my challah directly al gabi the blech? I have a little bit of a difficult time answering the question because Lamaisa, it would seem for the Mishnah Brura that you cannot. Now, so the Ilam here maybe wants to be machalik in the case of how the Mishnah Bir Halacha quotes the Dagam Ravav and the Ran, but Lamaisa, Ayin Sham, that even Rav Yadler over here was only willing to take it so far, and he's being maskim that it's not like the Bir Halacha. I think the answer is that I'm not saying whether Rosh Hashanah was chayzer or not is irrelevant. Lamaisa, we see in Shmir Shabbos he paskins which is enough of a svara for all of us. Whether the Mishnah Berurah himself will be makel, we'll leave it as a sarachin. I would think not. And that's the reason why I think that if you want to know what's like the psak to give over, I believe this is where it comes from. That you always should have the flame covered and an overturned pan. This is where it comes from the Bir Halacha. You want to know, is there a makom to put it shaloi kineged eish al gabi ablech? There's definitely a makom. There's no shayla. But I think that's where the lechatchila would come from. The lechatchila we want to get the Mishnah Berurah as well.
The Mishnah Berurah would be asking to the overturned pan because that takes care of the mention.
So it's a very good question. He doesn't seem, you're saying, well, I'm even being more liberal within the world of Mishnah Berurah. That level, the Chacham Echad said, Kuli Amam Leidim, and that we can hear. Now you want to?
He specified that stuff because there's food in the top, no?
No, because he's talking within Sevei. That's the same rate. Maybe maybe no. Maybe you're right, and maybe we are going one step more liberal than the Mishnah Berurah. But that's one step. You want to now go to the next level and put a shaloik neged eish. I have a hard time. Lamaisa, if someone wants to know, is there a makom to be makel? There certainly is a makom to be makel. This last case that we just started talking about, we're going to stop here, but it is a case that needs to be dealt with, which is Ritzal, you're mentioning, which this is a point in the Paiskim. Is it because it was there before Shabbos, or could you mamish have a maifis that you could do Nesinah L'Chatchila al gabe your pot of food, and then move the pot of food and then put it directly down and end up with your Nesinah Chila directly al gabe ish, which no one wanted to be makel, whether it was a taif or not. Maybe not. Yeah, you're definitely allowed to have your own chedushim. I think the statement is the road to not Gan Eden is paved with your own chedushim. I don't think that's the statement. And we will end over.